It's so easy to be average. It takes a little something to be special, Don. It takes a little something special to be a great player. Did you push yourself to be great today?
Yeah. The man of scarlet and gray. Yeah.
Let's go.
The man of scarlet and gray. What we reading now? Who we listen to? Who we rocking with hard?
The man of scarlet and gray.
Who we vibing with? Who we riding with? Who we clapping for loud?
The man of scarlet and gray.
What we reading now? Who we listen to? Who we rocking with hard?
The man of scarlet and gray.
Who we vibing with? Who we riding with? Who we clapping for loud?
The man of scarlet and gray.
It's time for it. You ready for it? It's MotSaG. You better know it. It's go Bucks. Every time. Hating on us, you better get
Your undisputed source of all things Ohio State. This is the Men of the Scarlet and Gray podcast. Here's your hosts, Shannon Summers and Chip Minnick.
The man of scarlet and gray.
Buckeye Nation, welcome to another great edition of Men of the Scarlet and Gray podcast here on Buckeye Sports Radio, a V-Sporto channel. I'm Shannon Summers from menofthescarletandgray.com, along with my esteemed colleague.
I'm Chip Minnick, also from menofthescarletandgray.com.
How you doing today, Chip?
Well, I'm excited to do another great show with you. Let's just say I'm looking forward to talking about Ohio State against Western Michigan a little more than I'm interested in talking about how Ohio State looked against Northern Illinois last week.
Rumor has it that you were at the game, so I know we'll get more into that a little bit later. Discuss that. We're going to talk about the Western Michigan game coming up, and we're also going to have of our game predictions that we normally do, which I finally gained a game on Chip. I'm catching in on them. But before we get into all that, I want to remind you to download the Buckeye Sports Radio app on your smart device. You could either find it in the Apple App Store or Google Play for your Android device. As we get ready, we're getting ready to talk about the Western Michigan Broncos. Today we're honored to have Justin Kaufman from HustleBelt.com join us to preview the game. How are you doing today, Justin?
Doing quite well. How are you?
Pretty good. Thanks for joining our show.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Number one, you're pretty much going to be the only team to be able to say that you've played number one and number two in the nation so far this year.
Yeah, so far. I don't think they planned for the schedule to work out that way. Kind of like Coach Fleck says, when you schedule these games 3 years in advance, you don't exactly know that they're going to be number one and number two.
Yeah, it's kind of funny how sometimes that works out.
Yeah.
What are you looking forward to for this matchup? I know Ohio State's been having some offensive struggles, but their defense has been really stellar. What are some of the thoughts as being a Western Michigan fan, or what are you looking at most for this game?
I'm looking to see how Western Michigan improves off of their performance last week. 2 weeks ago, they had a less than stellar performance against the Georgia Southern Eagles down in Statesboro. And that game didn't go so hot, lost by a score of 44-17. Last week, they beat the Murray State Racers by 30 points. And I want to see if that shot in the arm kind of works going into this week and what's going to be a very hostile environment and what I imagine is going to be a pretty angry Buckeye team after what happened against Northern Illinois last week. We've had some defensive struggles, kind of the opposite of Ohio State. The offense has been sort of carrying us lately, and an ability to stop the run. Really interested to see how they corral Zeke Elliott.
I was going to, besides, thanking Justin for joining us, is, you already mentioned, for example, Jarvian Franklin, and the offense, some of the key offensive players for Western Michigan, Zach Terrell, I just mentioned Jarvian Franklin, and they have a couple of really solid wide receivers in Daniel Braverman and Corey Davis. If you had to, as an Ohio State fan, obviously I can look at the stat sheet, but what would you say is kind of like the main focal point of the end of the Bronco offense? Is it Franklin? Is it is it Terrell? I mean, just from your perspective.
Yeah, if you look at the numbers, the passing numbers look a bit gaudy at the moment, which I think is misleading for the Broncos. They're actually a very balanced attack. They like to split the run game and the pass game pretty equally. The running game really hasn't been up to snuff this year like it was last year. Jarvion Franklin, you mentioned, was the first player in MAC history to be named Freshman of the Year as well as MAC Offensive Player of the Year. So that was a pretty important award. If I'm a Buckeye fan, I think for this game in particular, Jarvion Franklin is a big body. He's a very tough runner that could cause some problems if he gets to the second level. And he has very sneaky speed for a guy his size. But what they really want to look at is the performance of Corey Davis. Corey Davis is an NFL caliber wide receiver with an NFL body. He's a very smart, great route runner, rarely drops passes. And when I was watching the game last week, I saw Kenny Galladay for NIU get open a few times, and Drew Hare missed a couple throws. I think if Corey Davis can get in the secondary and if Zach Terrell has any sort of time, that's something Buckeye fans will want to look out for. That might be the only hole in that defense.
You also mentioned that the offense right now is carrying for the team, and there's some defensive challenges. Now, I realize, you just mentioned how, seeing Ohio State against Northern Illinois, but it's not going to come as a surprise to Ohio State fans if Western Michigan all of a sudden abandons what they have done traditionally and comes out with, like a 3-4 defensive front. Like, can you update Ohio State fans on some key defensive personnel or defensive players for the Broncos as they come into Ohio Stadium?
Yeah, our leading tackler from last year is Grant DePalma, and we've suffered a little bit the early going of the season. He suffered an injury early on in the first quarter of the game against Michigan State. In fact, the majority of the defense was a little bit bruised after that game, and I think has a little bit to do with why the performance against Georgia Southern was so subpar. I think what you really need to watch for your Buckeye fan is the secondary, because I do believe that they're going to be called upon to make some tackles. I think Zeke Elliott is going to find his way to second level. It's a very young defensive front for the Broncos. They're also pretty undersized, so they don't lack for speed, but I see them getting pushed around a little bit. The secondary players you're going to want to watch are Ronald Zamort, especially in the passing game. He led the nation last year, tied with teammate Donald Seliskar, who left for the NFL, in passes defended. And Darius Phillips, who, in my opinion, is our number one corner right now, who is a converted wide receiver. He was our third leading receiver the previous year, and he's done a very good job in the transition, but we'll see how he can perform at the top level, especially guarding like with Braxton Miller, who I believe is who he's going to be covering this weekend.
Now, on the coaching front, PJ Fleck is definitely, one of the young up-and-coming coaching, stars, so to speak. He's gained a lot of notoriety and a lot of fanfare with, rowing the boat and all of the, motivational things, the tremendous turnaround job he's done with Western Michigan. So what kind of concerns as a Western Michigan fan do you have for PJ Fleck staying on long-term with Western Michigan? Because traditionally these kind of jobs are stepping stones. MAC jobs are traditionally stepping stones for something bigger and better. Like Urban Meyer, his first coaching job was Bowling Green, and that led him to Utah, which led him to Florida, which led him to Ohio State.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the Mid-American Conference is called the Cradle of Coaches for a reason. I think most big-time rosters in the country are looking at the Mid-American Conference for top-tier coaching talent. And I think the general consensus is that PJ Fleck is going to be a top-tier coaching talent, but he isn't quite yet. I think I'm very concerned in the mid to late future of him jumping ship. Sorry about the nautical puns, but jumping ship. It's just kind of a thing in Kalamazoo, I suppose. But I could see PJ leaving for a bigger job if the money was right. But at the moment right now, it's important to remember that he's a 3-8 football coach in the non-conference, and he only has 2 wins over teams with winning records, and that was last year against Central Michigan and Bowling Green. Both games on the road, as luck would have it. But they haven't beaten Northern Illinois. They haven't beaten Toledo. In fact, the program hasn't beaten either of those two since I came to college and left college. I've never in my life as a Bronco fan and covering the Broncos have I seen a victory over those two programs, which I think for Mid-American Conference programs, that's kind of the bar that's set. I think if Western Michigan achieves great heights this season, I think if they run the table in the MAC, PJ would definitely be a flight risk. he will receive more than one offer at that point if he won't already, barring a total disaster, which we all hope doesn't happen. But I think it starts this week with Ohio State to see how the team responds to what the coaching staff would call elite talent. Like you mentioned, they've seen the number 2 team in the country, Michigan State. Some pundits regard them as the number 1 team in the country, and that's yet to be seen. But will they be able to respond similarly to the way they did against Michigan State? This is not only a showcase game for the Western Michigan football program, but it's going to be a big showcase game for TJ Fleck himself.
All right, so you mentioned Kalamazoo, and this next question I have for you, in my humble estimation, there is no wrong answer. So being a beer fan, speaking for myself, nearby, Kalamazoo, Bell Brewery, what is your favorite from Bell Brewery in Kalamazoo, Michigan?
Oh, it's got to be Two Hearted Ale, the IPA. That's absolutely my favorite. I just got news today. I retweeted on my Twitter account. I think they're going to can Hop Slam, which is something they usually only sell for a very short period of time. That's a personal favorite. Not recommended for new beer drinkers as it's a little high in content, if you catch my drift. But those two are about to be my favorite. Oberon's obviously a mainstay for Bell's. It's a good summer drink, but Two Hearted definitely takes the cake. If I'm going to Bell's, that's what I'm getting.
Okay. Like I said, I agree with you on the Oberon and the Two Hearted. The Oberon's pretty much a good summer staple, and Two Hearted, when I can find it, I certainly pick some up. So those are the questions I had, right. Shannon.
We'll stay on the subject of the alcoholic beverages for a minute. Since you're living in downtown Cleveland, I don't know if you're familiar. You said you just moved down there in May. Mm-hmm. I think I just seen last night that October 21st, they're going to tap the first keg for Great Lakes Christmas Ale. I don't know if you've had that yet, but you might want to check that out.
I'm so glad you brought that up. It's one of my personal favorites. I think it's the best Christmas ale out there. So they sold it in Kalamazoo when I was in college. So budget allowing, I definitely bought a few 6-packs here and there.
Yeah, I'm hoping maybe I can finagle something and get out there in order to be out there for the first tap.
Oh, yeah. It's a great brew.
Yes, it is. Now, going back to the MAC conference and coaching and stuff, how much do you think within the last 2 weeks with the upset of Arkansas and our buddy Burt and the close game that NIU played against Ohio State, how much do you think the MAC is going to finally get some credit and some recognition that's been due for a long time?
I absolutely think that there's going to be some credit coming the Mid-American Conference's way. But the MAC, it's always been looked down upon as one of the lesser Group of 5 conferences. I think the Mountain West usually looks like the stronger of the conferences. But, I think I heard someone say that the athletic talent on the field has finally caught up to the coaching talent in the MAC. And I think there's some truth to that. And I think it became more evident the way they played against some top competition. I think NIU's performance last week was a prime example, or last week, it was a few days ago, but yeah, that was the Big Ten's best going up against the MAC's best, and it was a little bit of a sloppy slugfest on both sides of the ball, but I think it's going to turn some heads where people are going to start saying, this is a conference that can compete. This is either a conference we're going to want to schedule to bolster our strength of schedule, or a conference that we're deathly afraid of. I think either is good pub for the conference. But with that is also going to come a lot of scrutiny. I think the Mid-American Conference is setting the bar a little bit higher for itself on the football field. And I think any shortcomings are going to be looked upon with some higher level of scrutiny. One game in particular, I think Bowling Green heading down to Purdue this weekend. That's a game that Bowling Green expects to win. I think Purdue expects Bowling Green to win that game, everybody outside the locker room anyway. And if Bowling Green were to slip up in that game or look less than impressive, I think it would call into question some of the things we've seen in the last 2 weeks. So I personally hope that it wasn't anything fluky. There's been a ton of action going on. The hashtag was trending on Twitter for quite some time when Toledo beat Arkansas. So I think that was a pretty exciting day for us over at the Pelt, as well as in MAC country. And I would see it. I would look for that to continue.
It's funny. You said, you just got done mentioning about Bowling Green. I know Bowling Green was playing Tennessee pretty tough, and Tennessee just pretty much wore them down and blew it open. But then they went into Maryland and pulled off the upset against Maryland. It's a good time for the MAC conference.
Yeah, sure is.
You guys were fortunate enough, I guess, if you want to say, to host Sparty your first week of the season.
Yes.
You lost by 13 points. A lot of people were saying that Sparty didn't look that great. Their defense wasn't, on par or anything like that. As for the coming into the shoe, playing in front of over 100,000 fans, what are you expecting for the final outcome for this game?
Well, I don't think I can put a score to it. I think the spread, do you have the spread? I think last I checked it was 30 or north of 30, the point spread for the game.
Yeah, 31 and a half.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that spread's a little high. I wouldn't expect Ohio State to cover unless that line falls to about 28. I'll put it this way. I wouldn't be shocked if Ohio State comes out victorious by 28 and they score somewhere in the 50s. But I also wouldn't be shocked if it was another 2-touchdown game the way it was against MSU. Because I think some of the thoughts on the Michigan State game were credible in that MSU didn't look that good. Part of that was Western Michigan's wide receiving core testing that what was at that time a pretty makeshift defensive secondary for Michigan State. MSU looked very out of sorts towards the end of that game, and Zach Terrell threw a pick from the Michigan State 8-yard line that had it fallen into the hands of Corey Davis, it would have been a 6-point game with just over a minute to play. So it would have made things very interesting. But I think there's truth in either way. So I think you could see a Western Michigan performance much like the second quarter in that Michigan State game, where they just looked like they didn't belong out there, or you could see a performance like the other three quarters. And it might take something wacky like happened in that game. Darius Phillips ran a kickback after Michigan State's first touchdown. So I think if WMU gets it going on special teams, I could see it being just a few score game. But like I said, wouldn't be shocked if OSU covered a 28 or 29 line.
Is your biggest fear them coming out and playing angry, and figuring out the offense?
Yeah, absolutely. I think WMU's got the talent to overcome any initial push. They have a rather large offensive line that hasn't played up to its potential yet this season. But what I'm really afraid of is Western Michigan not being able to stop the OSU running game. I could very much see this team's got a little bit more a higher level of veterans on the team than it has in the past 2 years. So I think if something happened where Ohio State went up 14-0, I don't think the team would wilt, but I do think it could be representative of something that at that point is just beyond our control. I think Ohio State. I think it's heard the doubters. I think it's heard people, what people have been saying. This is a team that hasn't really, from what I've seen, I didn't watch the Hawaii game, but I haven't seen anything out of Ohio State that looks remotely what it did at the end of last season. So my biggest fear is, this team coming out and playing angry and looking like the team that beat Oregon last year and not the team that it was last week. That would be my biggest fear. And I'm a little bit upset at Northern Illinois for having all the fun on national television a week before and perhaps poking the bear a little too hard.
That's true. I think definitely the key to this game is going to be, I believe the Broncos are averaging surrendering 224 yards on the ground per game. And I think the whole key is going to be feed to Zeke and just get back to basics and, don't try to invent the wheel. Just do what you do and block your assignments and block downfield and get it going. Chip, what's your predictions?
Well, I said this last week on the podcast as it related to Northern Illinois. I'll just reiterate it as it relates to Western Michigan. And, we've already, all three of us have all agreed that Ohio State, the key aspect of this game is Ohio State needs to get the running game going in order for the other areas of the Ohio State offense to excel and perform. Because once Ohio State gets the running game going, that's what opens up the opportunities for players like Braxton Miller and Jalen Marshall and anyone else that you can possibly think of. I think a lot of the problems that I saw while in attendance against Northern Illinois, it's not just one simple thing, but I think first and foremost getting the offensive line to perform better, which will thus allow the running game to perform, which then opens up the whole field. I think that's going to be the key thing. So I am definitely inclined to not take the point spread, the 31.5. I think that is being far too generous to Ohio State, especially in light of their last 2 weeks against Hawaii and Northern Illinois. I do think Ohio State in the second half, once they get going, I think a lot of their swagger and confidence is going to come back. So I'm looking for 42-14 in terms of, kind of along the lines of that 28-point differential that we were just talking about. But I definitely think this is all right, if you want to say Ohio State's going to come out angry, fine. But I think of it more of, okay, like a reestablishing confidence game. Anger might be a part of that, but I definitely think Western Michigan, it has enough talent offensively to, keep Ohio State's interest and intensity for the entire 60 minutes. So I'm going to say 42-14 Ohio State over Western Michigan.
I just want to go on record, and we've said this I don't know how many times, especially to our listeners. We don't get together as far as our predictions on games and stuff and what we're going to predict. And I mean, when we're doing show prep and everything, we just, talk about what we're going to discuss basically and stuff, but we don't give our predictions to each other. So I just want to go and say, sir, again, you stink. I'm going 42-7 myself. I think that they are going to right the ship. I see they're going to be going up to the press box and having the offensive, co-offensive coordinator and QB coach, is it Tim Beck, right?
Yes.
I see him going to be starting to call a lot of plays. I see, Ed Werner concentrating more on the offensive line on the sidelines like he needs to. I mean, he needs somebody up in the box in order to call a lot of the plays. I think they're outthinking themselves, and they're going to get back to the basics. And let's get Feed to Zeke trending on Twitter here. And we're going to, like Chip said, get the swag back. And I'm going 42-7.
Now, out of curiosity, is it official that Tim Beck is going to be up in the press box? Is that official, or is that just your prediction?
I believe he's been up in the press box, but as far as calling the plays, I think Ed's been on the sideline the whole time. But I think he's the one that's been calling the plays.
Well,
and I think go ahead.
Well, I mean to cut you off. I was just going to say the rumor has it that last week that not only was Ed Werner on the sideline, but Tim Beck was also on the sideline, and Tim Hinton, who is the tight ends coach, was the only offensive coach up in the press box. So my point being that, I think Ed Werner being the offensive coordinator and the offensive line coach, listening to former Ohio State players such as Chris Spielman and more importantly, Jim Lachey, they're both in agreement that they don't know of any offensive line coach, regardless of whether it was at the college level or in the NFL, as they both had lengthy NFL careers. They said that I cannot recall ever seeing the offensive line coach not being on the sidelines to help coach the unit. So I completely agree. I don't see Ed Werner going up to the press box. And again, if Tim Beck is up in the press box as the eye in the sky, so to speak, I think one of the areas that a lot of Ohio State fans have either forgotten or maybe they just didn't know. People forget that Tim Beck was the offensive coordinator at Nebraska under Bo Pelini before coming to Ohio State. So even if, let's say that Ed Werner is responsible for the play call, and having Tim Beck up in the press box to relay information down to Ed Werner and Urban Meyer. Let's not forget that Urban Meyer has a headset on. He's saying, let's run this. Let's think of something else. That may just be all what they need. I don't see it as an example of Ed Werner being stretched too thin, being the offensive coordinator, but not seeing the field like a traditional offensive coordinator may be causing some of the, the very, to use Urban Meyer's term, some of the discombobulation. So I think Tim Beck can call out the scheme to Ed Werner, Urban Meyer. Team has plays that they want to use against that scheme, and I'm not going to be surprised when Western Michigan comes out and they haven't run a 3-4 before, but they're going to do it against Ohio State because why not? If it worked for Hawaii, it worked for Northern Illinois, why shouldn't Western Michigan try a 3-4 scheme? I'm thinking if Tim Beck can say, hey, they're running a 3-4, I'm sure Ohio State is practicing that over and over this week. I would guess that it should work better than it has.
Yeah, I agree. There's, unfortunately, you were the unanimous number one preseason team. I'm not going to use the word defend, but you won a national championship last year, and you're trying to win another one this year, and you're having issues like this, and you shouldn't be with the explosiveness of this offense. Things need to change, and they need to change in a hurry and get fixed. We have more predictions about who I think the starter is going to be and everything. Yeah, we'll get into that a little bit more, I guess, when we talk about the NIU review and stuff. I just wanted to thank Justin for coming on and joining our show.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
So, Justin, how could is there a Twitter handle, or how can our fans, follow some of the work that you do as it relates to, Western Michigan?
Yeah, so my Twitter handle is JLCOFFIN1, JL Coffin 1, JLC in all caps. And then you're going to want to follow Hustlebelt, and that's just at Hustlebelt. A lot of good stuff for any and all Mid-American Conference news, and general silliness, anything you want. So that's over at an SB Nation affiliated site, so it's over there. Check us out. It's a lot of fun. A lot of good writing goes on there. And yeah, look out for game previews and stuff leading up to the game for Buckeye fans. You want to check out Western Michigan and learn a little bit more. We'll be happy to have you.
Outstanding.
Yeah, definitely check out their stuff. Great stuff. They do a great job over there.
Thank you.
All right. Yeah, thanks.
Well, thanks again for being on the show, and best of luck to Western Michigan this weekend as they come into Columbus to play Ohio State.
Yes, thank you so much.
We know you love the Buckeyes, but do you love your Buckeyes? Yes, your Buckeyes. We're talking about your testicles. Testicular cancer is the leading cause of cancer in guys aged 15 to 35, but it can occur at any age. If caught early, testicular cancer is almost 100% curable, but at later stages, the treatments are more involved and unnecessary deaths can occur. Monthly testicular self-exams are your best weapon for early detection for testicular cancer. Learn how to do your monthly testicular exams at checkyourbuckeyes.org. There's even an app to help you out. Again, it's checkyourbuckeyes.org. Guys, it's important. I'm a survivor of testicular cancer. This is something that's near and dear to my heart. I was lucky, stage 1. Make sure, I know it's embarrassing, but get yourself checked out. There's nothing worse. I mean, how embarrassed are you going to be laying in a coffin, or how embarrassed are you going to be throwing up, going through chemotherapy and everything? And I know, Chip, you've lost your father, unfortunately, to cancer, so you've seen what it can do to people.
Absolutely. There's nothing I wouldn't do to be able to have just even a 5-minute conversation with my father today. He didn't have testicular cancer, but there's no reason why anyone, when there are things that you can do to not only prevent but catch any kind of incidence of cancer, in this case when we're talking about testicular cancer, don't be so proud, don't be so arrogant to believe that it can't happen to you. So like you said, you're a survivor. It's really important to make sure that you do what you can to be on top of and make sure that things don't necessarily progress much further and faster than you would ever hope.
Yeah, I agree. If it wasn't for my wife, I probably wouldn't be here because of my pride. I understand the embarrassment, but she's the one that, she was going to drag me by my ear to the doctor and show him. So I'm glad that she was there for me, and I swallow my pride, and every day I'm thankful that I have.
You are listening to Men of the Scarlet and Gray podcast here on Buckeye Sports Radio.
All right, Chip. It's funny because game 1, the home opener I was at for Hawaii. Now the Northern Illinois game, you've got to experience. Kind of jealous because you got to watch Jim Tressel basically get his introduction in the pouring rain. But why don't you go ahead and discuss some of the game with us?
Well, I do want to thank my cousin who provided me a ticket. But before reviewing Ohio State's 20-13 victory over Northern Illinois, I want to give credit to the Huskies for coming into Ohio Stadium and giving the Buckeyes all that they could handle. The Huskies came out in a 3-4 defensive front like Hawaii did, and it should come as no surprise for all future opponents. Western Michigan, I expect to do the same thing to Ohio State until the Buckeyes show that they can handle it. So compliments to the Ohio State defense, because Darren Lee had a pick six that proved to be the difference against Northern Illinois. That's what sealed the deal, the 20-13 victory over Northern Illinois. Being in attendance in Ohio Stadium, it was, like you said, the pouring rain came down on Coach Trussell and all of us in the stands. As soon as Coach Trussell left the field, the rain stopped, but a lot of the grumbling and general discontent about the offense, the poor offensive performance by the Buckeyes, even with the rain stopping, the grumbling continued. Heading into the Northern Illinois game, I think a lot of Ohio State fans, such as myself, were under the impression that the Buckeyes' poor performance against Hawaii was, I don't want to say was caused by, but was linked with a short week. You think about they only had a couple days to practice, probably a lot of exhaustion from the previous game against Virginia Tech. So Ohio State had a full week of preparation for Northern Illinois, and then they still performed poorly. And the problems go across the board. I heard in the stands, I heard after at the tailgate, people complaining about Ed Warner as the offensive coordinator. I heard people complaining about missing Devin Smith as a deep threat. In my humble estimation, I believe the crux of the issue for Ohio State is just a complete lack of a consistent identity offensively. I don't see one area of the Ohio State offense that the Buckeyes can hang their hat on to have a consistently productive play. The traditional Woody Hayes, 3 yards in a cloud of dust, off tackle. I don't see any kind of one singular play that Ohio State has that they can say that's our go-to play, that even if the opposition knows that it's coming, that they can stop it. So that to me is first and foremost something that they have to develop, is that consistent offensive identity.
You're exactly right. The thing that I've noticed, and it's funny, you were sitting there last week talking about announcers on TV on the Big Ten Network. You're lucky you didn't listen to the game on TV, because I forget the one gentleman's name from ESPN. But every time, they should have went for it, this and that, but whatever. My disgust for ESPN is, well documented, and it didn't help with the game day issue that happened. But anyways, my biggest thing is, like you said, what the fans are saying, the lack of the deep threats, the Ed Warner play calling. There's no identity. There's so many things offensively that are not clicking, and you're trying to put your finger on it. I know a lot of people are saying it looks better with JT under center, and you look at the numbers, and really it's not. Yeah, he scored he moved down and got a touchdown, but he threw a bad interception. They had 5 interceptions on the day. I mean, look at Alabama. They had 5 interceptions and they lost their game. Granted, it was probably a better opponent that they played, being, I think it was Ole Miss, right?
Correct.
Yeah, so, they played a better opponent with Ole Miss, but still, 5 turnovers, you're supposed to lose the game. Plain and simple. There's no reason for it. It's just discombobulated, like Urban Meyer was saying, discombobulated.
Right. It is. It's frustrating, and let's kind of take a step back to against Alabama. Ohio State had turnover issues. Against Oregon in the national championship game, they had turnover issues. Yep. Turnover issues against Hawaii. Turnover issues against Northern Illinois. So something has to be corrected. And I, for one, don't believe it is all necessarily ball security. One of the turnovers was Ezekiel Elliott fumbled. Well, I think that was from the vantage point I had in the stands. I think that was more of just a helmet, hitting the ball, at the right spot. I don't think Ezekiel Elliott now.
I think that one was the Curtis Samuel.
Okay, so Curtis Samuel. So I stand corrected. My point being that I don't think it's necessarily that we have a team of fumblers per se. with Cardale, the 2 interceptions that he threw, one of them I believe was, the ball kind of slipped off of his hand late that kind of fluttered, was an easy interception. One of them was just a very poor decision. JT Barrett's interception was he was late. I just think ultimately it remains to be seen what direction Coach Meyer is going to take with the quarterbacks. The speculation is obviously that JT Barrett is going to get the start against Western Michigan. Cardale Jones has started the first 3 games, and for the last 2 games, JT Barrett has come in to relieve him. Considering JT Barrett not only came in for the first half, but came in and played the entire second half, it wouldn't be surprising to me if JT Barrett gets the start against Western Michigan, because he did play the majority of the game against Northern Illinois. The aspect that I think has been missing from the Ohio State offense, that JT Barrett, I agree with you. I don't think JT Barrett has played that much better than Cardale Jones. But one aspect of the offense that I wouldn't be surprised to see if JT Barrett gets the start is if Ohio State goes to a faster tempo offense. I'm not saying necessarily all no huddle, but faster up to the line of scrimmage, get the play run, and because that's something that Urban Meyer has preferred to do, and it's something that JT Barrett has done well with in the past. I think in the last for this season, for the 3 games that Cardale Jones is in there, it's been a lot more of get up to the line of scrimmage, see what the front is, run the play. And I'm not saying that's necessarily the root cause, but I think that JT Barrett has always been a spread option quarterback, whereas Cardale Jones has been molded into that. So I think it wouldn't be surprising if they go to a faster tempo offense against Western Michigan.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I even tweeted, I think it was during the game or after the game, that I almost guarantee that you're going to see JT Barrett start. I'm still almost there on that, but it kind of wavered last night after listening to one of the Cleveland news stations. Allegedly, Jim Donovan of Channel 3 was saying that basically his sources and the word that he's getting out of Columbus is Cardale Jones is going to be the starter on Saturday. The way I've looked at this was you have 4 preseason games before you start Big Ten play. Cardale Jones was going to have a minimum of 3 starts to prove himself. I mean, this is just my opinion. With those 3 starts, if he was able to take the team and run with it and be the high-powered, explosive, offensive juggernaut that we always thought it was supposed to be, then I think he was going to be his team. It hasn't happened, and I think that JT is going to, it's going to be his turn starting the game, like you said, get all the reps. I know everybody's been, different podcasts, different sites. Everybody's talking about you need one quarterback to be practicing with the team to get continuity. Yeah and no. I mean, there's pluses and minuses to everything. So they know what they're supposed to be doing. To sit there and say, well, they're always looking over their shoulder. Irregardless, you're always looking over your shoulder. I mean, you get into the professionals and you're going to be looking over your shoulder unless you're, a Tom Brady deflating footballs and getting away with a bunch of stuff. So, I mean, it's just, I see JT as being the starter, and it's going to be his team from here on out, I do feel, unless he falters, and then we have a very serious issue. And this, I think it starts off basically, with the coaching. Tim Beck, he comes in. He's not comfortable. He hasn't had that much time, so he's not throwing himself around and taking any kind of leadership role, basically. And he's kind of playing a backseat to Ed Werner and everybody else and Urban Meyer. So now it basically is sounding like from the press conference from Urban Meyer on Monday that Tim Beck's going to, I'm hoping from what I'm understanding, is that basically he might, working with the quarterbacks more with mechanics, which I don't understand if you're the quarterback's coach why this wasn't done beforehand. Maybe start doing some play calling up in a booth. I mean, I don't think he came out and said Tim Beck, but I'm just guessing at that. So, I mean, hopefully something gets righted in this ship here pretty soon.
Well, you mentioned how kind of the idea of like the preseason games, the way I look at it, is against the game against this coming weekend against Western Michigan, and then Ohio State goes on the road for the second time at Indiana, and then they come home and they have homecoming against Maryland. No disrespect to any of those teams, but this is where Ohio State needs to come up with that consistent offensive identity, because the week after Ohio State plays Maryland, say what you will about Penn State, but defensively, you can rest assured that Penn State's defense will be more than ready to throw a 3-4 front or a bear front or whatever kind of front that is giving Ohio State challenges. So they need to figure out what is the best way to neutralize a 3-4 front, the way that Hawaii did, the way that Northern Illinois did. I mean, we've been advocating, and I've been suggesting, okay, getting Ezekiel Elliott more involved. You know, a lot of, and I myself forget, because it's just been ever since the Virginia Tech game, Ezekiel Elliott has been, with all due respect to the late, great James Brown, he's been the hardest working man, paraphrasing, he's been the hardest working man in Columbus. I mean, because he's been, to get 100 yards has been very difficult the last two games. You mentioned a moment ago about different podcasts and different analysts. I have the utmost respect for Chris Spielman as an analyst. The other day after Urban Meyer's press conference, Chris Spielman made a suggestion on a formation change. Now, granted, he hasn't talked to Urban Meyer, no idea if this is going to happen, but listening to him talk about it, he suggested that instead of Ohio State running the offense the way that they have been, you could still run the spread option attack, but Chris Spielman suggesting running it from the pistol formation. And the idea for our listeners is it's Ohio State still, the quarterback's still in a shotgun formation. So even if let's just take, okay, it could be Cardale Jones, it could be JT Barrett, but whoever the quarterback is, instead of Ezekiel Elliott only being 2 yards from the line of scrimmage, what you have is Ezekiel Elliott is 7 yards back from the line of scrimmage. And so when the quarterback gets the ball, fields the ball, he is already running with a full head of steam. He gets the ball about 6 yards deep. But the difference here is that Ezekiel Elliott would have more time to read the blocks, especially along the interior offensive line play. That's where a lot of the issues are. So Jacoby Bourne, the guards like Billy Price, Pat Elflein, if they need to combine blocks on the nose tackle, Ezekiel Elliott can read it. It can also open up that quarterback zone read game. Coach Meyer says it's no longer in the offense, but that's something that JT Barrett does very well. So I'm not suggesting that that's going to happen, but the idea of maybe a pistol formation could possibly open up for Ezekiel Elliott as well as JT Barrett if JT Barrett gets the starting nod.
I think one of the other keys, too, is with the offensive line, not just, the blocking and opening up holes and everything, is penalties. They seem to, if they do start getting any kind of momentum, they get, a holding call, a false start call, and it sets them back, and it seems like they're not recovering from those little mistakes. I could be wrong in that, but that's...
It was frustrating because there were times where Ohio State on, third and short, the receivers would catch the ball, but they'd be a yard or two short of the first down. And it's just, geez, oh man, like, how do you guys not know where the first down marker is? My brother-in-law was with me. He was becoming more and more exasperated, just could not, he was incredulous at, what we were all witnessing. So it was it was very frustrating to say the least.
Yeah, and the thing, it's, you notice the difference from last year to this year. One, it could be, the Tom Herman thing. Two, definitely the deep threat. You don't have a deep threat in order to be able to stretch the field out, so teams aren't playing you honestly. So they're putting more guys in a box in order to be able to stop the run. Three, the blocking downfield by the wide receivers. I mean, don't remember where I read this at, because I feel bad not remembering because I like to give this person credit. But it was basically, not having Evan Spencer, Evan Spencer being the MVP last year, like Urban Meyer was calling him, and you see why he was being called the MVP of the offense last year with, his blocking down the field. You would think it would have rubbed off on some of the Zone 6 guys, and they would take pride in this, but for some reason, it's just not happening and not everything's clicking. So instead of let's, keep harping on the offense and what's wrong, blah, 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 and the harping on the negative right now, let's talk about the positive. Urban Meyer graded out the whole defense, I think, except for, unfortunately, one player as champions. And you can't say enough about what this defense is doing right now.
Well, I'm glad you mentioned that because Northern Illinois, I believe, threw for 80 yards through the air. They were averaging 370 plus. So that's a credit to, all three areas, the defensive line, the linebackers, the secondary. I think Adolphus Washington has definitely come ready to play, to make his senior year noteworthy and special. The linebackers all played well. Garyon Conley has been playing exceptionally well in his first year as a starter. So the defense has definitely been carrying the offense for the last 2 weeks. If Ohio State, and I already mentioned the idea of when it came to with Darren Lee making the interception that proved to be the difference maker between Ohio State going into overtime against Northern Illinois. Darren Lee's has been carrying on, some of the plays that he made last year from the 2014 national championship year. A lot of the plays that he made last year against Navy, against that team up north. Those are the kind of things that Ohio State needs to rely upon in order to, until they get their offensive identity established. I said it before, I will just say it again. Western Michigan, at Indiana, Maryland, these 3 games are so crucial to get that shot of confidence back across the offensive unit. The defense has been doing their job. The special teams, I would be remiss if I didn't say Cameron Johnson had a tremendous game punting the ball. There were no issues with kicking the ball out of bounds that had been plaguing the special team units. The coverage has been tremendous. So you're absolutely right. You don't want to necessarily harp on all the negatives, but I definitely think Ohio State. I don't want to put it on a like that. It's full scale alarm, but it is very disconcerting that that the defense and the special teams, they're holding up their end of the bargain, and the offense is completely not.
Yeah, I mean the defense. It's incredible. I mean, you said like the incredible play by Conley. A lot of times you see defensive back guarding the wide receiver, and they don't get turned around in order to knock the ball out or anything, and they get the pass interference. And that one that Conley had in the end zone where he got turned around just in time and got just enough of, the ball on his fingertip to knock it away and off the hands of the Northern Illinois wide receiver. He looked like a professional out there. He's definitely taken a step forward. It's great seeing the way he's playing. Obviously, Darren Lee, the way he plays, the linebacker core is one of the best. And the key is, the defensive line, putting pressure, getting that pressure on the quarterback, and it's helping out a lot. I know 2 years ago we had one of the worst pass defenses in the nation, and here we are with one of the best. And I think everybody needs to go on Twitter and apologize to Luke Fickell. I mean, 2 years ago you wanted them fired and wanted to run them out of town. Where are you guys at now?
Well, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention the defensive line rotation, and what I mean by that is, everyone talks about Joey Bosa, and I'm not trying to take anything away from Joey Bosa. He's an exceptional player, but Tyquan Lewis, this is his first year as a starter. He's been playing extremely well. Sam Hubbard, combined with Joey Bosa, on a sack against Northern Illinois. I think a player who was, I don't want to say largely invisible, but one of the defensive linemen that I'm sure that Urban Meyer was really hoping would kind of step up his game was Michael Hill on the interior defensive line. So it's nice to see, at least if there's an area of the roster that's playing well, that the defense, we could go on and on about not only the job that Luke Fickell has done, but that more aggressive attitude that Larry Johnson as the defensive line coach, Chris Ash and Kerry Combs as the secondary coaches. It's an across the unit, defensive unit effort that is truly come shining through against Hawaii and Northern Illinois, and I hope it continues as they prepare for Western Michigan this weekend.
I agree. I like to personally thank Penn State for what they did for Larry Johnson by letting him join the Ohio State staff. I think it was last week. Fickle was asked about the rotations for the defensive line, and he came out and said, I don't know what he does for rotations. I don't even question it anymore. He just goes out there and sets the guys out there, and they do what they do. So, I mean, that's a credit to Larry Johnson. I mean, Penn State, you didn't know what you had. Thank you very much. I also like to thank our buddy Bert, who in Arkansas, for letting Chris Ash come and join the Buckeyes, because he's definitely put his hand all around that secondary and helped change it. And we have a formidable defense, which the Silver Bullets are back, and it's nice. You are listening to Men in the Scarlet and Gray podcast here on Buckeye Sports Radio. Okay, so let's jump into our game predictions. Time for our weekly game predictions, which I believe in my one game or two games back.
Just one.
One. Okay, yeah. I can't remember. So I mean, I gained a game.
You did. Yay. Absolutely. You picked wisely last week. When it came to,
although we both got the Notre Dame Georgia Tech game wrong.
That one, that's a credit to the Fighting Irish. I mean,
yes, I agree.
When you have all that, the offensive personnel that have been injured and lost for the season.
And didn't they just lose a safety too after this game? Yeah. It's amazing what's going on there. And my hat's off to Brian Kelly right now. What the job he's doing, as much as I'm not a big fan of the Golden Domers, but hey, you keep doing what you're doing, and good things are going to happen. And my hat's off to you. All right, let's go into our first game here. We've got UCLA, one of my choices for the Final Four. They're favored by 3 points going into Arizona against Rich Rod. What's your thoughts on this?
Tough. This is tough because I have so much respect for Josh Rosen. I know he had a rough game against BYU, but I think that's
he's had a rough 2 games so far.
I think anytime you're starting a freshman quarterback, you are bound to take. You better be prepared to take some hills and valleys kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm going to go with Arizona, not only because it's a home game. I think that Rich Rodriguez, he'll have some kind of offensive wrinkle that will be just enough to outlast. That's what I'm thinking it's going to be. I don't think it's going to be a blowout. I know Arizona, put up 77 points in their last game. They're not going to do that against that UCLA defense. I think UCLA is a really good team, and I'm not necessarily going to suggest that this could knock them out of the playoff, by the way. But I think going on the road at Arizona, I'm gonna go with Rich Rodriguez in Arizona here.
It's funny you talk about having a loss this early in the season, and we both had Auburn as one of our picks, and having a loss this early doesn't necessarily knock you out for the playoffs. But I just think, the way Auburn's playing, it's definitely not good for them. But with the UCLA-Arizona game, Arizona lost by 10 last year. And, it wasn't played in Tempe. UCLA's got 18 returning starters, as we know. We got the freshman quarterback, Rosen, who the first game he showed that he was phenomenal. Last 2 games he's shown he's human. There was, I think, 13 minutes left in the game against BYU, and they were down by 10 points or something like that, 14 points, I can't remember. But they leaned on their running game, and they came back and won that. I know Scooby Wright is allegedly supposed to be practicing this week and trying to get back in for the game. I think that's going to be one of the keys for Arizona, depending on his health. I mean, is he going to play? Is he going to be slightly hurt trying to play? Something's telling me to go ahead and stick with my preseason pick, and I'm going with the Bruins in this one. I think they're going to escape the desert with the close W. Our next one here, it's a barn burner. BYU at the outhouse that allegedly is always full but never is. That team up north is favored by 4.5. What are your thoughts?
Pains me to admit it, but I think the team up north, they're starting to figure out what works offensively, which is to run the ball. And by running the ball, they're controlling the clock, and they're also keeping it out of the hands of their dreadful quarterback. I mean, it's just one of those things where, when it comes to, Jake Rudock, I get what's that old Woody Hayes expression? When you throw the ball, only three things can happen and two of them are bad. It seems like the vast majority. I mean, like that is definitely summarizing kind of with Jake Rudock. It's man, I think you're closing your eyes and holding your breath and hoping for good things. Whenever he drops back to pass. So I think they figured out. All right, let's just run the ball as much as we can. And say what you will about that team up north going into the season. The strength of that team was their defense. Their defense is definitely playing very physical. I think that BYU coming across the country, going into the outhouse, it's a noon kick, which means I think the BYU, I think they might be a little off in terms of their internal clock. So I'm going to go with that team up north, as much as it pains me to admit it.
Well, one of two things are going to happen after this week. Either I'm going to be way behind or I'm going to be taking the lead. I'm going with BYU on this one. Now, I know they say one man's trash is another man's treasure. Obviously, in the case of Jake Rudock, it's not true. I know that that team up north has been leaning more on the USC transfer Ty Isaac, and he's looking a lot better at giving them a running game. I agree with you as far as I think in our preseason discussion about the Big Ten teams and everything. I said that the Maize and Blue had a really good, a pretty good defense. But something's telling me they almost pulled off the win against the Bruins at UCLA. I have a feeling that they might have a little bit of magic, and the Maize and Blue being young, still learning, getting gelling together. I think that they're primed for Hail Mary upset here. So I'm going with the BYU Cougars. Our final one, USC they're +6 at Arizona. Or the Trojans are favored by 6 at Arizona State.
Tough one to call because
yes, it is.
It really is because USC, they were they were a very popular, maybe not necessarily from you and me, but a lot of national people had picked USC to be a playoff team. There's so much turmoil going on, rumors of USC players fighting, after getting beaten by Stanford last week, fighting amongst themselves. We haven't even touched on the fact that Steve Sarkisian is still under heavy criticism and scrutiny from USC fans. On the other hand, I think Arizona State, they really did not impress me much at all in that opening game against Texas A&M. I realize you can't necessarily judge a team by just one game, but I think Arizona State, for all the people that were picking Arizona State to be a possible national title sleeper, I'm still not sure what they necessarily thought that they were getting there. So I'm gonna take the coward way out and use the logic that USC, they're favored by 6. There's a reason why out in Las Vegas they continue to build nice, shiny new buildings. So the odds.
It's definitely not using Ohio State spread.
Exactly. But I'm just gonna go with USC. But it's not a very strong sense of conviction on this pick.
Well, we are going for the clean sweep of picking opposite.
Okay.
I'm going with Arizona State, and the main reason I'm going with Arizona State is because of the implosion that is happening with USC. I think, and it all started with the drunken incident at the alumni dinner or whatever it was with their head coach. And it seems like it's gone downhill. I mean, they got spanked pretty good by a Stanford team that got beat by Northwestern. Yeah, it was week 1, but still. I mean, they came into USC and they pretty much put the throttle on them. They gave up 41 points and 474 yards. So I see the Trojans just continuing their implosion, and Sarkisian must, he probably just should stand on the sideline with the beer and just wait to get fired by this point. All right, that's going to do it for us here on Men of the Scarlet and Gray podcast. Hope you enjoyed another great show. We want to thank our listeners for tuning in and help spread the word. Remember, you can listen to our show on iTunes, SoundCloud, Stitcher, and of course on Buckeye Sports Radio. You can follow them on Twitter at Buckeyes Radio. We want to thank Justin Coffin. You can follow him at Twitter at JLCOFFIN1. Check out his work at hustlebelt.com. They do a lot of great stuff over there, and you get to understand the Western Michigan team before they come in and everything. You can follow our show on Twitter at MotSaG Podcast, MOTSAG Podcast, and like us on Facebook. Chip, how can people find your work and follow you on Twitter?
Well, on Twitter, you can follow me at Chip Minnick, MINNICH. First and foremost on menofthescarletandgray.com, where I have a weekly preview and article. I also contribute to athlonsports.com, and I also have a personal blog, fromthemindofminnick.blogspot.com.
Excellent. Definitely check out his work. Chip does a great job. You can check out my work not only on our site, menofthescarletandgray.com, along with a bunch of other great writers that we have. You can check it out at knowitallfootball.com. You can follow me on Twitter at SOMMERS84. Also, I'd be remiss right now if I didn't take a moment for our colleague, Jeremiah Sharp. I know he hasn't been on the podcast because his son does football practice on Tuesdays and stuff, but I'd be remiss, and I think it would be touching if a lot of our listeners wouldn't stop by and just say hi and keep him in your prayers. He recently lost his father, unfortunately, and our hearts here go out to him and can't imagine what he's going through. So he's in our prayers and all that good stuff.
Absolutely. Very, very, very tough thing to go through, as somebody who did it 5 years ago. And like I said, there's not a day that goes by where I don't miss my father. So, my heart, my thoughts, my prayers go out to Jeremiah and his family, because that's a tough thing to have to deal with. Even when you know that it's coming, it's a tough thing to deal with.
Yes. And, I think Jeremiah's a great guy and everything. One important programming note, since we basically got, actual confirmation while we were doing our show today. After we do our show today, in the next day or two, you're going to see another special Men of the Scarlet and Gray podcast drop. And we are having the honored privilege of talking about Ohio State and college football in general with the Bill King. What do you think about that, Chip?
I'm stoked, because Bill King is, if not the best, one of the most knowledgeable college football analysts in terms of talk radio. He's presently, based out of Nashville, Tennessee. We're not just talking about things that he could talk chapter and verse about Ohio State football, but just about any college football team across the country. When you think about Ohio State football, he could start probably reciting games that he remembers when Coach Hayes was patrolling the sidelines. So to say that we have the King, Bill King, as a guest is something that is a special honor that going to definitely do my homework for that one, because I don't want to show myself up in front of, arguably one of the most knowledgeable and well-respected college football analysts in the country.
I agree. They don't call him Bill as King for nothing. All right. Thank you for listening, and you guys have a great time, and we'll talk to you soon. Go Bucks.
Go Bucks.